All right. Welcome everybody to the August 20th IPFS All Hands Status Update. What's going on meeting? I think we only have a few items on the agenda this time. Does anybody want to be note taker? Would anybody please volunteer to be note taker?
Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
Jacob, thank you. All right, so I think the only sort of primary agenda item we have listed down so far is just a quick notice from me. I won't be here next week. I'll be traveling for a conference. So if somebody would not mind taking over this job and just sitting here and corralling people and pointing at different people to talk, that would be great. There's a link to the issue in GitHub that is an overview of your responsibilities. Mainly it's just make sure you're here on time and post a notice to IRC beforehand. But let me know on Slack or IRC or GitHub if you'd like to take over and just designate you as the person for next week. That's it for me and what's written down under agenda items. Does anybody else have any last minute items you want to add or mention before we move on to demos? Lionel?
Yeah, I guess there's an interesting development last week. I opened an issue to change HTML spec to include distributed web protocols on the safe listed list. Basically, this is a list used by APIs such as Navigator, Register, Protocol Handler that lets a website to register a redirect-based handler for arbitrary protocols. That way you can support like IPFS : without like actual native support. Still, the URL, if the browser finds that URL on the page, it will work. It will redirect to HTTP-based reader. So it's like an intermediary step. But if we introduce our protocols into the HTML spec, that may opens a lot of doors because we gain legitimacy. We are able to take advantage of the fact that those safe lists are already used by Mozilla for things like protocol handlers used by web extensions. So basically, if other vendor tries to implement the same API, they basically reuse the same safe list and things like that. So I posted the link to the issue to the chat, and I'll add it to the notes. And it's just a quick shout out that we have intent to implement from the Chromium team, and we have already one positive review. And basically, I don't think anyone opposes that. There was a huge blocker for, like, historically, if you had wanted to change this list, there was an opposition. The spec body was waiting for vendors to implement change, and vendors did not want to implement change because they want to implement HTML spec. So chicken and egg problem. But right now, we were able to cut a lot of red tape, and it looks promising. So yeah.
I have a question. Is that the WHATWG HTML spec or the W3C1 or both? Because I know the culture is kind of different between those two groups.
It's the first one.
Okay.
And that's the important one because it's the one implemented by all the key players in the web browser vendor space.
Awesome. Any other questions on that for Lyle? All right, moving on. Matt, you had an update about workshops.
Yeah, well, so this is a workshop that I attended last week that is a project that I don't think many people know about, the Underlay. There's links to the concept notes there I added it to the notes. I recommend reading about it. It's sort of, it's basically an attempt, if you know what Freebase was, which has now become Google Knowledge Graph, it was a public open database where people were building semantic information. They were building like a graph database of knowledge for the web that Google then acquired and absorbed and made private a few years ago and turned into Google Knowledge Graph. This is a project, this is an initiative or project or collaboration to basically reboot that as an open data set that's designed to be locked open. It's not certain to use IPFS right now. The current sort of prototypes that they're building are using IPLD. And so this workshop was like an initial visioning workshop to sort of think about the data models involved. So it wasn't even getting really into the functional details of how it would work. It was just looking at the data models and considering the edge cases and structures that are necessary there. But yeah, it was a really cool workshop that happened at the MIT Media Lab. And the project is a collaboration between the MIT Press and Protocol Labs, and I'm blanking on the other participants. That's bad. So it's a really interesting project. You should read up on it. And if you have thoughts on how knowledge for the web should be structured or accumulating, you should jump in and chime in. It's all happening in the open. They're doing all their work in PubPub, which is designed for sort of collaborative commenting and iteration on concepts and research. So jump right in. There's a mailing list, all those other things. Oh, and especially if you're using IPLD, this project, as part of this, as part of these prototypes that are using IPLD, they are working with IPLD and JSON LD. So it's sort of this spanning this linked data IPLD kind of space, which is something that's been hovering there as someone should take a stab at that for like 2 years. And they're stabbing at it. So if you're interested in semantic web or RDF or JSON LD and are curious about how that's applied in IPLD, you should take a look at that project. That's all.
Very cool. Are there any questions or other things about that? Anybody? All right. Well, then let's move on. We've got one demo two demos, one from Alan.
Right. I would recommend that isn't like you watch that in your leisure time. It's like 15 minutes long, but it's essentially a transport and discovery module for JS IPFS that uses the new Mozilla's libD Web library, which is a library for enabling kind of various peer-to-peer functionality to web extensions. But it means that a IPFS node running in a web extension, like a JS IPFS node, like running as an embedded node in Companion, can use MDNS. And it can create a TCP socket, listen on it, make connections to other nodes, discover them on the local network, and generally do stuff that you'd normally only be able to do with a JS IPFS node running in Node.js. So it's pretty damn awesome that that library exists, and I've just plugged a few bits and pieces together to make it work. But what that video shows is 2 nodes running in 2 different browsers, discovering each other over MDNS, connecting to each other, and then adding some data to one of them and catting it out from the other one, and the communication happening just using P2P. So we remove all of the other like discovery and transports from the node. So the only discovery and transport that it can use are the new ones that are provided by LibD Web. So it's all good stuff. Take a look. It might take a while, and I do a lot of talking there as well. So I'm sorry. Ha, rad. That's about all I've got to say, I think. If anyone has any questions, then I will take them now.
You go first, Rob.
Okay. So I may not totally understand all the ins and outs of this properly, because I know there's some sort of issues with broader participation and discovery in the DHT with JS IPFS. Does this sort of pave the way for improving some of that, or are there other major functionalities this helps pave the way for in JS IPFS in communicating better with Go IPFS?
Yeah, right. So it's not so much paving the way for a DHT to exist, just more like giving it the abilities to do what Node.js can already do when it's running in a Node.js environment. Because in the browser, we're like super restricted on what we can do and like how we can talk to each other. We're like properly sandboxed. So this basically opens up the ability for JS IPFS to talk to other nodes. And like I should probably say that LibD Web, there's a possibility that it might, as a library, make it into Firefox. And if it gets into Firefox, then that will be super rad, because it might also make it into other browsers. And then it means that we're one step closer to a fully peer-to-peer web with IPFS nodes running in the browser.
Have you shown your demo to the video to the people who are working on LibD Web at Mozilla? Are they excited about it?
Yes, I have shown it. Well, Ghazala, the guy who's been working on LibD Web, has seen it. Whether or not he's super excited about it, I don't know, but I imagine he's well jazzed about it.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a question. Is there anything we should be doing to, because this is the LibD Web effort and the work you're doing with it is part of this, and the stuff that Lido was just updating about is us making solid stabs in this effort to like upgrade the protocols of the web and upgrade the browsers. And there's a lot of like organizations and people and perspectives involved. Is there anything we could or should be doing to help you like get this work out there in front of people and help like get momentum behind it?
Right. So I guess what it needs is exposure. It needs people using LibD Web. Like I guess Mozilla need to see it being a valuable thing. It needs blog posts. It needs excitement about it. That's all I can think of in terms of what we can do. Is I'm gonna get the word out, get people using it, get people opening issues, talking about it, and yeah, generally getting it out there.
And currently, in order to use LibD Web, you need to use a nightly build of Firefox. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Lido, you were going to say something.
Yeah, so just two quick remarks on that. One thing is that we probably could make a blog post on like blog IPFS.io generally about LibD Web, I think, when we polish protocol handler and the discovery and transport to the point when it's like one command and runs. We probably could make a blog post just so that it's something we can link to, and Mozilla really appreciates when people are talking about using LibD Web, because that gives a momentum to invest more time in that. Another thing is that it's related to work done by Alan on MDNS. We, as IPFS community, we are currently changing the way we advertise our services over MDNS. And that's just a quick shout out from my end that if we sort it out so that the same spec is implemented by Go IPFS and JS IPFS, we basically have JS IPFS running in IPFS Companion, announcing itself to nodes on the local network, and that node can be IPFS in other companion running on someone else's web browser, or it can be Go IPFS running on the local node. And basically, it won't matter which implementation it is, right? That's the end goal. So on our internal end, we need to sort out the MDNS spec. I think it's like ongoing effort. There's an issue and PR with new spec. I think Alan is probably implementing the future version, but it's just some additional background from my end.
Yeah, right. I guess the one cool thing that I didn't mention was, yeah, like Lydell said, the possibility for like IPFS nodes running in a web extension to be able to interop with local or discover and talk to local Go IPFS nodes or JS IPFS daemons like on the local network is just, that would be amazing.
If you want help writing that blog post, I'm happy to help.
Any other questions about those before we move on? All right, I think Hector has a demo about IPFS cluster control.
Hey, so we are in the process of getting the next version of IPFS cluster out. It's gonna be 0.5.0. And the main feature is that you can add content directly using cluster. So normally you do IPFS add, and you can now do ipfs-cluster-ctl add. Pretty much works exactly like IPFS from the user point of view. The difference is that it will allocate that content to several peers at once, and it will send it, once it is chunked, it will send the blocks directly to the destination peers, meaning that when adding is finished, you can immediately pin, and your content is immediately pinned or replicated in several places. It doesn't need to, until now the workflow will be you add to IPFS first, and then you pin in cluster, and then it needs to copy what you pinned to the places where the pin was allocated. And now you can just add directly, and the moment you pin, all the content is there in the destination peers. There's a video that I recorded, and yeah, it's just that, just to let you know. I will hopefully come back when we do the final release and tell you more. Yes, Rob?
It sounded like it does, but does it automatically pin the same way IPFS add does?
Yes. It's just pinning in several places. Instead of adding to your local node, is adding to multiple nodes and pinning in multiple nodes at once.
Any other questions for Hector on that? All right. Any other last minute questions, asks for help, agenda items that you want to announce before we're done for the day? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thanks everybody for showing up for today's All Hands. I guess that's all we've got, and see you all online and next week.